So, hello and welcome to the Cynic's Guide to Hippie Shit. I am here today with Fiona Sargeant, and we're going to be talking. Well, we spent a little bit of time kind of trying to figure out what the title was going to be, and our original thought was possibly hypnotherapy with a difference, but we decided to go for cognitive hypnotherapy as a title. So, welcome, and
Yeah.
what on earth is cognitive hypnotherapy?
So, cognitive hypnotherapy is obviously rooted in hypnotherapy and the traditions of hypnotherapy. The so this is where I'm kind of venturing a little bit out of my what I know. So, as I understand traditional hypnotherapy, it's very much obviously the client will come in, they will talk about whatever the problem is, and then the hypnotherapist will put them into a deep trance and aim to work on the subconscious um, to kind of reduce the negative, whatever the negative is, and also to kind of find pathways out to the positive. So, for example, if you want to stop smoking, but it's this idea that our conscious mind isn't really in control. So
Yeah.
you need to get in and give the instructions to the unconscious mind. So my training was in cognitive hypnotherapy, which is founded by a guy called Trevor Sylvester, and he kind of had a very broad background. He got interested in all aspects, and he was exploring many different techniques. And his approach is closest, I think, to what we call Ericksonian. So Erickson was one of the big names in hypnotherapy, but his Erickson's approach was that it's not about the hypnotist, it's about helping a person find their own solutions.
Mhm.
So it's not about kind of putting them in a trance and then telling their subconscious what to do. So it's a lot more interactional.
Okay.
And the trance state. So the other thing about hypnosis is we can all go into trance states, but traditional hypnotherapy, where somebody else is using what we call an induction, guiding you into a trance state, um, there's an interesting kind of spread of some people being really super easy to put into a suggestive state, and other people being not easy to put into a suggestive state. So there's just like the traditional normal distribution for that kind of thing. With the more interactional approach, you're kind of bypassing that problem. So you're finding the person's kind of finding their own way into this mental state that they need to be. And we do still use inductions. Often, if we do use them, they're later in the process, and it's when the client's built up a trust, they've got used to working with you, and often it's a consolidation phase. But throughout the interactions, it's much more that we're working with memory and with imagination, both of which are a different mental state, both of which put you more into the right brain state, both of which make you more suggestible. And that we use then the language and the ideas that the client is finding. So the client will start to find their own metaphors for how they're feeling or what's going on, and they'll also find the things that their resources. You kind of ask about more in their life to find what resources they have, things that they can apply from elsewhere. So somebody who's very confident, laughing and joking at the pub with their friends, but can't stand up in a meeting at work, find a way of kind of connecting that resource, that work, making it more like, less perceived as a place where they're going to be judged, and more where they can relax and maybe present how they would when they were at the pub with their mates. So there's a lot of these kind of subtle things going on. Um, and Trevor also brought in things from cognitive theory, so cognitive behavioral therapy, neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, a lot of psychoeducation. So when somebody comes and they say, "Oh, I've got this problem," you get, right, okay, so this is part of how your brain is working. It's, the reptilian brain is taking over and you're going into a panic mode. So you give them an understanding so they don't just feel like, I'm just in, why am I doing this? It's nonsense. And you go, no, there's a really good mechanism for it. So then they can just relax about that. And then you find alternative, find how they can find a solution for that. So it's the emphasis is very much on the the therapist being a problem solver. So I call myself a pathfinder, not a hypnotherapist, because it's
Ooh,
about finding their own path. And I kind of know roughly the terrain, but then I find out more about what's going on for them, and then I kind of find a route through that to help them out of the place that's stuck.
so when you say you're a pathfinder, it also sounds like you're describing quite an interactive kind of teamwork between yourself and the client.
Absolutely. We call it the therapeutic alliance, that you're working together. And one of the things that I always really encourage with my clients is um, to tell me if they feel something isn't working.
Hmm.
Um, so it's very easy as a client, you're coming in and you're like, oh, I don't know about this, I'm not sure what's happening. But then you don't want to say to the therapist, it's not working. You don't want to say, I don't understand. And so you're then kind of going along going, oh yes, no, that's definitely helped. But actually, if I hear this isn't working, I'm struggling with it, I don't know what, I can find another way. So that's one of the things I say is, I've got lots of tools in my box. If this doesn't help you, or you feel as though it's not helping you, I can find something else. So it's really important you give me that feedback at any time. And I've done that with somebody, and that lots of people, but yeah, one in particular I remember was very, no, this isn't working. And actually that was a major breakthrough for her, because she was very much a people pleaser. So to sit and say, this is not working for me, and for me to then say, I'm listening, I hear you, we'll stop doing that, we'll think of something else, was a really powerful healing moment in itself for her.
So what kind of difficulties will people come to you with?
So hypnotherapy, again, it's good for kind of traditional hypnotherapy is good for lots of things like changing habits and anxiety, phobias. Those are the kind of the common labels. But for me, I'm kind of more interested, partly because of my path into it. I'm very interested in the kind of slightly vague and not really got a label problems. So for me, I was kind of, I guess, on the edge of depression, if not going into depression, because I was stuck in a job, stuck in my life, and couldn't see anything changing. And there's no label for that. It's like I'm just kind of a bit unhappy about everything, and I don't really know what I'm doing. Um, so for me, there's a whole range of work there to help people out of the boxes that we build for ourselves. So we build a life and we live it. And then after a while, the walls that we've built for that life become too much of a constraint, and we don't know how to constructively move beyond them. So that's an area that I'm very interested in working with people on. But I've had kind of I've done additional training. Obviously, one of the things that happens with anyone who goes into this field, you're always kind of on the lookout for new tools and new healing modalities and developing. And I've done work around trauma and shame,
Ooh,
because that was one of the areas I felt when I'd finished my training was, if I hit something really big, I'm not sure I can deal with it. So I kind of made sure I'd got the good skills around that, and that was quite powerful. And I've worked with somebody, and it's really interesting how profound problems that people experience, when you root them back, aren't necessarily a big T trauma. Because it's often in childhood, it can be something that looks or sounds quite innocuous, but has had a really powerful impact. And so being able to take people back and then deal with whether it is a big T trauma or a kind of something that might seem less innocuous, but happens to a child who's young enough that it goes in and then
yeah.
forms this whole knot of, this is what you've created as the meaning around it.
So do you do kind of like regression then as part of what you
Yeah.
do?
We call it the timeline regression, is one of the very powerful tools in the cognitive hypnotherapy toolkit. Um, again, it's where we're using memory as the thing that guides into the trance state. And it's a process of, so we're always very careful with obviously memory is very pliable. We talk about it as it's a bit like opening a Word document. So every time you go back to a memory, you're opening it up and then resaving it, and there'll always be something that gets changed.
Mm.
And so when we go back to a memory, it's with very specific intention of not saving, not changing the what happened, but the meaning that we've given it. And we do that via metaphor. So it will be going back that you as the adult can see things differently. How do you perceive it now? Was it your fault as a child? And obviously the answer is always no. And then the giving of love, and something that you put in there, which is a metaphor for knowing that the meaning around it has now changed. And we then, part of the process then is to do some checks around, okay, have we got back to the root? So there's a little bit of kind of going backwards and forwards to see if the feeling, because there's always a feeling associated with it, and has that changed? Has that gone? Has that got better? And then a kind of subconscious reprocessing. So this is where they usually are in a very deep trance state by this point, quite naturally. And then you're just bringing them back, letting that return from the early time to now be a gradual process of the subconscious mind reworking. Every time it's accessed that memory and pulled that meaning up, it can now bring back the new meaning instead. So you're kind of, it's like little stitches. Each stitch is getting remembered with different information.
So it's like when you go through a document and you change all of one word to another word.
Yeah.
Putting that extra meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like if it was self-blame, then you change that to be not my fault, and things like that. So it's obviously the client's words, the client's whatever it is they want from it.
So is that the big difference then between what you do and a more traditional approach, that the client's coming up with the words? So you're not guiding the client through, a specific script, but you're helping them find their own words.
Yeah. So it's very much there's a process. And so the course that I did is kind of like a 2-year one. And in the second year of the course, there's a lot of work around flexibility of process, because you can get to a sticking point. And how you can, and by flipping to maybe a different technique and kind of pulling something else in to help people get over a sticking point. So there's a process. There are things that you can do at any point to kind of divert if you need to. But the language is always the clients, the pacing of the process is the clients. And as I say, if they find, no, I'm not really getting anywhere with this, and then that's fine. You can say that's fine. We'll switch to this other thing that we're going to work with for a bit now. And you can do that even as the therapist, and you see somebody kind of struggling with something, then just moving around within the space as to. So we use techniques around our sensory awareness of things. So obviously, how's it feel? Where's that in the body? But we can then play with that. And it's like, okay, so if you were to take that feeling and put it out in front of you and look at it, what color is it? What shape is it? Yeah. So those kind of things. So if somebody gets stuck, you can go, oh, that's interesting. You've got a feeling of resistance. So, and then you can take it out, you can talk about the resistance, and then you can start to play with changing the resistance. Nice. Rather than it being like, oh no, I can't do it. It's just like you just seamlessly switch techniques. So those kind of things. So we've got about those ones, and some people are happier with that. They love their playfulness comes out, and their metaphors just come up really easily for them. And other people really struggle with that. And so then we might just work with simple, I've worked really effectively with people who are it was just one word. and they were kind of going from, they weren't really working with feelings and emotions, but the word for that feeling came very easily. So then we would just work with that.